There was a famous hotel fight where he got into a real fight with another wrestler. Both men hurt each other badly. That's not a story. That's real violence between workers. It happened because of an argument. It showed Kane could be truly violent. Kane also had a name for leaving companies suddenly. He would just not appear, leaving bosses in trouble. This made him a nightmare to book. You never knew if he would show up. In the ring, Kane was known for safe punches but dangerous slams. He didn't have the skill to make moves look good but keep them safe. His choke slams, while big, were often done without care for his opponent's safety. He would drop people with full force. This is very risky with a man of Kane's size. Bret saw Kane as someone who believed his own hype. Kane thought his look was enough. He didn't work to become a skilled pro wrestler. The fear with Kane was that you never knew what you would get. Would he appear? Would he be safe? Would he decide during the match to do his own thing? There were also worries about Kane's mental state. He was known for being hard to talk to. Some wrestlers felt Kane was unstable. This added another layer of risk to working with him. Number 8. The Authors of Pain. Akam and Razor, known as the Authors of Pain, were a popular tag team. They had the look and the crowd love. But Bret Hart had a big problem with their finishing move, the last chapter. Here's how the move worked. Razor would lift the opponent high up. Then Akam would climb the ropes and jump, hitting the opponent off Razor's shoulders. The opponent would fly back and land flat. Bret said this move was too risky. The person taking it had no way to protect themselves. They were up high and then knocked back blindly. One wrong move and they could land on their neck. Bret compared it to his team's move, which was done lower, allowing for a safe fall. The problem with the last chapter was that it took all control away from the person taking the move. In most wrestling moves, the person selling can protect themselves. With this move, you were at the mercy of the team's timing. If they were off, you could be badly hurt. Bret's fear of the Authors of Pain wasn't about them being tough. It was about their disregard for safety. He felt they cared more about the look of their finisher than the health of the person taking it. Usually, that person was a lesser-paid wrestler. And in Bret's view, if you can't do a move safely, don't do it. The Authors of Pain were loved by fans, but criticized by many in the locker room for being stiff. They came from a different style. They worked where being tough was valued over being safe. But when they came to WWE, they brought that rough style, and it didn't always fit with the more cooperative style Bret liked. Number 7. MVP. Montel Vontavious Porter, who wrestled as MVP, was a legit tough guy. He was a fighter. He was a loner who didn't follow rules, and Bret Hart had to feud with him. In the late 2000s, Bret described MVP as hard to work with, not because he was stiff, but because he was uncooperative. MVP didn't get the role of the villain. In wrestling, the bad guy is supposed to make the good guy look strong. That means falling for them, selling their moves, and losing in a way that makes the hero look good. MVP refused to do that. He wouldn't fall right. He wouldn't sell. He acted like he was too tough to be hurt. This created a nightmare for someone like Bret. How do you have a good match with someone who won't work with you? How do you tell a story when the other person won't play their part? The fear with MVP wasn't physical danger, though that was possible with a fighter who could really hurt you. MVP had real combat skills. If he decided to make it a real fight, you were in trouble. Most pro wrestlers can't defend against a real grappler. The fear was that the match would fail. The fear was that MVP might decide during the match to shoot on you. In a scripted setting, cooperation is key. Working with someone who might break that trust is terrifying. You're in front of thousands and suddenly your opponent won't let you do your moves. MVP was also known for having an attitude. He felt he was held back in wrestling. This made him difficult. He would sometimes refuse to cooperate as a way of showing his frustration. Bret and MVP had a famous moment at a big event where they fought. The feud never really worked because MVP was so hard to work with. The matches lacked the storytelling Bret was known for because MVP refused to play his part. Number 6. Rikishi. Wrestled as Rikishi. He was a super heavyweight, often over 400 pounds, and Bret Hart thought he was one of the most dangerous workers he ever saw. The problem with Rikishi was simple physics. When you're that big, every mistake is worse. A normal-sized wrestler might give you a bruise if they mess up. Rikishi could break your bones. That's what happened to The Undertaker. Rikishi did a leg drop that broke The Undertaker's cheekbone. The Undertaker was out for months. The injury was very bad. His face was messed up. The bone protects the eye, and when it's broken, there's a risk of losing vision. The Undertaker needed surgery. It was a major injury of his career, and it could have been avoided if Rikishi had better control. Rikishi also hurt Kevin Nash with a bad seated splash. Nash's back was almost ruined. The pattern was clear. Rikishi hurt everybody he worked with, not out of hate, but out of clumsiness. When you're 400 pounds, you can't just throw your weight around. Bret often compared dangerous big men like Rikishi to safe ones like Yokozuna. Yokozuna was heavier, but he was light on his feet. He had skill. Bret said Yokozuna's leg drop felt light because Yokozuna knew how to control his body. Rikishi didn't have that skill. He was heavy and wild. He would drop his full weight on people. His splashes really hurt. The fear of seeing Rikishi on the schedule was the fear of being crushed by someone too big to be safe. During Rikishi's push, many top wrestlers complained about working with him. The office pushed him because they wanted a monster, but the workers knew he was dangerous. Some guys refused to take certain falls from him. Others tried to keep matches short to lower the risk. Number 5. The Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior was a star in the late 80s and early 90s. He had a great body, huge energy, and a special link with the crowd. But to Bret Hart, Warrior was everything wrong with wrestling. Warrior was all show and no skill. He would run to the ring, shake the ropes, and get too excited before the match. This meant he was tired by the time the bell rang. His matches were short and messy. His speeches were crazy, and in the ring, he was dangerous. Bret criticized Warrior for stiff, wild clotheslines. These weren't safe clotheslines. These were full-force hits that could cause a head injury. The problem with Warrior was he didn't know the difference between looking strong and actually hurting people. He thought hitting hard made him look real. Warrior once dropped a manager carelessly, hurting him. The manager wasn't a wrestler. He wasn't trained to take big falls, but Warrior didn't adjust. This showed a basic lack of respect. Warrior didn't get the cooperative nature of pro wrestling. He saw himself as a superhuman character. He believed his own hype. He thought that selling for his opponents would weaken his character. So he would not sell, refuse to act hurt, and work stiff to keep his image. Bret has called Warrior a fake hero. He felt Warrior didn't respect the business. Warrior only cared about his own character and his own money. He didn't care about having good matches or helping others get over. The fear with Warrior wasn't about losing. The fear was about getting hurt because your opponent was careless. The fear was about having a bad match because your opponent had no skill. When you worked with Warrior, you knew the match would be bad. You just hoped you'd get through it without injury. After Warrior died, Bret said he wished he had been nicer to him in their last talks. But he never backed down from his professional opinion. Warrior was dangerous to work with. Number 4. Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley was pushed hard in the mid-2000s WWE. He had an amazing body and natural intensity. He won a championship and was being prepared for a top run. But behind the scenes, Lashley was known as one of the most dangerous workers in the company. Bret Hart and other veterans have all said the same thing. Lashley didn't know his own strength. His finisher, the Dominator, was a move that needed care. You have to make sure your opponent lands safely. Lashley would do it with full force, dropping people dangerously. The Dominator was a great-looking move, which is why fans liked it. But from a worker's view, it was scary. Every time Lashley lifted you, you didn't know if you would land safe or on your neck. There was no consistency. Lashley also had a name for getting tired fast. He would be exhausted after a few minutes, and a tired powerhouse is the most dangerous opponent. When your muscles are tired, you lose the control needed to safely lift a heavy man. Your arms shake, your grip fails, and you drop people. Bret's fear of Lashley was professional worry. Lashley was the new type of wrestler. All body, no training. He was rushed to the top before he learned how to work safe, and people got hurt because of it. Lashley himself got injured often because of poor technique. The culture of the WWE locker room at that time protected guys like Lashley. He was a project. Management wanted him to succeed, but guys like Bret had to deal with the results. They had to get in the ring with someone who might accidentally end their career. Number 3, Roman Reigns. Now we move to the modern time. Roman Reigns is a top star in WWE today. He's a former world champion, a good talker, and an exciting wrestler. But in recent years, Bret Hart called him out as unsafe and reckless. 2 events sparked Bret's criticism. First, Reigns broke Daniel Bryan's nose with a knee strike on TV. The knee hit Bryan's face hard. It was a bad injury seen on camera. Bryan's nose was broken. He needed surgery. Second, and more serious, Reigns injured The Rock with a buckle bomb, and also hurt Bray Wyatt with the same move. The buckle bomb is a move where Reigns lifts his opponent and throws them back into the corner. The problem is, the opponent is thrown blindly. They can't see or protect themselves. When Reigns threw The Rock into the corner, The Rock's neck was hurt. This ended The Rock's career. The Rock was a legend who had finally returned to WWE. His run was supposed to be special. Instead, it ended with a neck injury. When Reigns threw Bray Wyatt into the barricade with a buckle bomb, Bray's shoulder was torn. Bray had just won a top title. He was supposed to be a new face. Instead, he had to give up the title because of the injury. Bret Hart spoke out. He said a pro wrestler should be in control at all times. Breaking someone's nose is a failure. Ending someone's career is unforgivable. Bret saw himself as a voice warning against the modern style, a style that cares more about big moments and crowd pops than the safety of the performers. Reigns was hurt by Bret's words. He said they upset him. Bret later said sorry for his tone, but he stood by his criticism. Unlike others, Bret respects Reigns' talent. He's not saying Reigns is bad. He's saying Reigns' style is risky, and that fear, the fear that the new generation cares more about spectacle than safety, is what worries Bret. Number 2, Samoa Joe. Nufalau Sayanoa, who wrestled as Samoa Joe, was a big, agile man who made his name on the independent scene. He worked a stiff, hard style. In this style, you make contact look real by actually making it real. You hit hard. For Bret Hart, working with Joe was a nightmare. Bret has described it with a vivid phrase. Wrestling Joe was like wrestling a truck filled with sick. That image says it all. The weight, the stiffness, the awful experience. Joe's strikes were real. They weren't fake strikes that look good. They were real hits that left marks. Wrestling Joe was like being in a real fight, except you had to let him hit you. Joe's slams were done with full weight. Wrestling him for one night was like wrestling 3 normal opponents. Your body would hurt for days. The thought of wrestling him for a year was too much for Bret. At one point, Bret was given a choice. Stay a good guy and feud with Joe for a year or turn bad and work with other top stars. Bret clearly said avoiding Joe was a reason for his choice. That's a big admission. Bret was willing to turn on his fans just to avoid the physical pain of working with Joe. That's not fear like a coward. That's the smart choice of a veteran who knows his body can't take that beating. Bret was older then. He'd had a long career. He knew a year of Joe matches would break his body. But Bret's fear of Joe wasn't just physical. It was also about cleanliness. Bret claimed Joe never washed his gear. His clothes were wet with old sweat. The smell was bad. Wrestling Joe meant being close to someone who smelled terrible. In pro wrestling, bodies are in close contact. Cleanliness is key for safety and respect. A wrestler who doesn't wash their gear doesn't respect their partners. To Bret, that lack of respect showed in the ring. Number 1, Goldberg. And now we get to the big one. The man who ended Bret Hart's career, Goldberg. If there's one name in every talk about Bret Hart's fears, it's Goldberg. This isn't a story. This is real anger based on a real injury that changed Bret's life. Goldberg was a former football player pushed to the top with little training. He had a winning streak that made him a star, but in the ring, he was clumsy and dangerous. He used raw power instead of skill. And Bret Hart knew this was a problem from the start. At a big event, Bret defended his title against Goldberg. He felt the danger. He knew Goldberg was reckless. He knew Goldberg had hurt others. During the match, Goldberg was supposed to do a kick to Bret's head. In pro wrestling, this is fake. The kicker slaps their leg for sound while stopping their foot short. It's basic. Goldberg didn't do that. He kicked Bret's head with full force. Bret said it felt like being hit by a car. He was dazed, but he finished the match because that's what wrestlers do. He kept working, making it worse. That kick gave Bret a severe head injury. He had headaches, dizziness, memory loss, and sadness. He couldn't wrestle anymore because another hit could kill him. The career of one of the best technical wrestlers ever was over because Goldberg didn't know how to do a safe kick. Bret has never forgiven Goldberg. He has said Goldberg was one of the most unprofessional wrestlers ever. He said Goldberg hurt everyone he worked with. He pointed to Goldberg's stiff work, his dangerous moves, his lack of training. Goldberg's spear was too hard, his jackhammer was sloppy. Bret has said Goldberg belongs in a hall of shame, not a hall of fame. This shows how deeply Bret feels. To Bret, the Hall of Fame should honor those who mastered the art, which includes protecting your opponent. By putting Goldberg in, the industry says a dangerous style is okay. Goldberg has said he is sorry for the injury. He said it's his biggest regret. He's apologized to Bret many times. But for Bret, sorry doesn't change anything. Sorry doesn't give him back the years he could have wrestled. Sorry doesn't fix his brain. Bret's fear of Goldberg came true in the worst way. It was a career-ending injury caused by someone who shouldn't have been in the ring at that level. Goldberg was pushed because he looked scary, but he didn't have the skills to work safely. And here's the hard part. Bret has also said Goldberg is a good person. He doesn't think Goldberg hurt him on purpose. He thinks Goldberg was just bad at his job, and that sometimes makes it worse. A mean opponent can be stopped. The locker room can handle them, but a clumsy powerhouse is a random danger. Goldberg is the opposite of everything Bret believes. Bret was trained to protect his opponent. The main rule was that you take care of your partner's body. In a fake fight, trust is everything. Goldberg was a football player who used power. Bret valued skill and storytelling. He believed wrestling should look violent but be safe. Goldberg valued intensity. He believed wrestling should be as real as possible. These ideas don't mix. When they met, Bret paid the price. When Bret talks about Goldberg, he's not just talking about one man. He's talking about a way of wrestling he finds risky and disrespectful. He's talking about an industry that pushes untrained athletes to the top for their look. He's talking about the price he paid. Bret has kept this alive for over 20 years. Every interview he brings up Goldberg. Some people think he should let it go. Some think he's bitter. But Bret sees it as his job to warn the next generation. He doesn't want another wrestler to have their career ended by an unsafe worker. The hard truth. So there you have it. 10 wrestlers. Bret Hart feared from Jon Moxley to Goldberg. But we need to ask, is Bret Hart being fair, or is he just a bitter old star who can't forget? There's no doubt Bret has real complaints. Goldberg did end his career. That's true. Samoa Joe was stiff. Others agree. Warrior was careless. Other workers say the same. These are facts. But Bret also has a name for holding grudges. He's been criticized for not moving past an old betrayal. He's been accused of being too hard on younger wrestlers trying to make it. When Bret criticized Roman Reigns, it hurt Reigns' feelings. Reigns looked up to Bret. Then his hero called him unsafe. That's hard. Bret later apologized, but the hurt was done. When Bret talks about Goldberg, it's been over 20 years, and he still talks about it. He brings it up without being asked. He can't talk about his career without mentioning how it ended. At some point, does that become an obsession? Bret Hart is a legend. He's one of the greatest technical wrestlers ever. His matches are studied by all serious fans. He helped shape wrestling in the 1990s. But he's also human. He's a man who had his career cut short, who was betrayed. Those experiences made him bitter. Bret is a bitter man. He can't let go of his anger. He can't move past his disappointments. And that bitterness colors what he says. When he talks about these wrestlers, you have to ask, is he being fair, or is he putting his anger on them? So, when we look at this list of 10 wrestlers Bret Hart feared, we have to ask, is this a fair list of dangerous workers, or is this the grudge list of a man who never got over his past? The answer is likely both. Bret's criticisms are based in truth, but they're also made bigger by his personal pain. The best in the ring has become the best at holding grudges, and while his points about safety are good, his way of saying them sometimes makes people not listen. He's become the old man yelling, warning about dangers the new generation doesn't always see. But maybe that's okay. Maybe wrestling needs someone like Bret Hart to be the voice of warning. Maybe the business needs someone to remind everyone that a big move isn't worth it if someone gets hurt for life. Maybe Goldberg does belong in a hall of shame. Or maybe Bret just can't move on. Maybe he's stuck in the past, reliving that kick over and over, blaming Goldberg for everything. Maybe he's so focused on what he lost that he can't see what he did. The truth is likely in the middle. Bret has good points about safety. The wrestling business has a bad record of protecting performers. Guys have been paralyzed. Guys have died. Brain damage is common in retired wrestlers. Someone needs to speak up. But Bret's tone and his inability to let go hurts his message. When he calls out Goldberg again, people stop listening. When he goes after a young guy like Roman Reigns, it seems small. When he can't do one interview without bringing up old pain, it makes him look stuck. What we know is this. Bret Hart's list of feared wrestlers is really a list of everything he thinks is wrong with pro wrestling. It's a critique of an industry that cares more about look than skill, spectacle than safety, and politics than talent. Whether you agree with him or think he's bitter, you must admit his view comes from years of experience. Bret Hart gave his life to pro wrestling. He gave his body. He gave his relationships. He gave everything. And the business took everything and gave him a head injury in return. Can you blame him for being bitter? So next time you see a wrestler do something dangerous, ask, would Bret Hart approve? If the answer is no, maybe there's a reason. Maybe Bret's criticisms are worth hearing, even if they sound bitter. Or maybe Bret needs to let it go. Maybe he needs to forgive and move on. Maybe he needs to make peace with how his career ended. Either way, Bret Hart will keep speaking his mind because that's who he is. And maybe that's just what wrestling needs. If you learned something new, hit the like button. Share your own thoughts in the comments below. Which wrestler do you think was the most dangerous? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into wrestling history and legends. Thanks for watching. If you care about wrestler safety and the future of this business, share this video to keep the conversation going, and subscribe to stay updated with more real stories from inside the ring.